4, no, Book 5, The Third Era, The First Year. Chapter 24, The Summer of Anticipation. Memorial Day weekend came, and Milo downloaded these new songs, Lord of the Dance, and I Vow to Thee My Country. Over Memorial Day weekend, the Biancotellos went to church on Saturday night and sat with Uncle Mike and Grandpa Tony. Pavani, Minyu, and Nusha also came to church that night and sat in the same row that the Biancotellos had set up. Pavani was next to Grandpa Tony in church. After church, there was an ice cream social, and then Ray took Milo and Lydia to see 50 First Dates with Adam Sandler and Drew Barrymore. On Sunday, Uncle Leo and Aunt Jane hosted Sylvester's 6th birthday. That afternoon, Milo, Matt, and Salvatore took their annual walk over the playground. That night, when Matt and Eustace were over, Milo got a bit defensive with Lydia over saying some not so flattering things about Minyu. Mind you, Milo was still not quite over Minyu, and seeing her as a Palm Sunday as a server and Anahita that dream one night, all drove these memories quite close to home. The finale of that year was a trip to Indianapolis for Kyle's graduation ceremony. The Biancotellos left that afternoon as soon as Lydia was out of school and drove down with Grandma Pearl to Indianapolis. Over that weekend, the Biancotellos and the Rumcorns and Grandma Pearl saw Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, which had just been released in theaters the night before. At midnight, they were going to go to the midnight showing, but were just too tired by the time they got there. Milo had been waiting a good while for this movie to come out. In fact, he found the movie to be a very transcendent experience. Margaret and Lydia did not like the movie as much as the first two, and saw the theme as being a bit dark. Plus, Lydia was not a fan of Michael Gambon as Dumbledore. Lydia missed Richard Harris, who was the original Dumbledore, who had just passed away not too long ago. For Milo, the new Dumbledore reminded him of Monsignor Warner. The next morning, after the graduation ceremony, which was quite long, the Biancotellos went to church in Indianapolis, which was Trinity Sunday. The offertory hymn was this new hymn by Rory Cooney, known as All Things New. Then in the afternoon, they went to Panera's for lunch. After lunch, the Biancotellos returned back to Centerpond. On the way back, they ate at a restaurant they had not been at for the last 3 years, since after coming back from Drake's Forest. When they got in the restaurant, Milo asked if they were the only people there, and we shushed him for that one. Yuriyama's vision of Ravage. The seers Yuriyama and Daniel summon Melendil, Alexander, Kashmir, and Akarism in the spirit of the diplomat Cecil Spring Rice. Yuriyama had recently seen a vision of a Hypercordo taking his throne in the major financial hubs and sending off his offspring henchmen to weaken other metropolises and ravaging the micropolises. One micropolis becomes invaded by goblin-like offsprings who transform this region into a place of shame and scorn. The micropolis turns into a massive work camp of the most horrible conditions under brutal taskmasters. The slaves are forbidden from complaining unless they want to lose their only way to survive. Oh, the benefits. Then there is a great emigration from the micropolises into these major financial hubs under the power of the Hypercordos. One family is fleeing the micropolis after the city is taken over by goblins, and all residents are summoned to give allegiance to the Hypercordo known as Pecunia. The emigrants turn into mere shells of themselves and mere robots of a foul machine. The Cecil Charism rises and announces that he will raise an army to fight in the battle against the Hypercordos through the ways of gentleness and paths of peace. He declares that his victory comes not from earthly armies nor paths of carnage. The Charism goes on to explain that he knows of those soldiers on Earth who love the micropolis and will bring them on the power of loyalty to their home and willingness to sacrifice glamour, power, wealth, and status. Then Daniel rises to announce his vision of a glorious day of victory, where a band of soldiers are cheered in victory over the Hypercordos as the flags of victory wave. The soldiers are hailed at the mighty hands of Brother Element, the Element's brother Volition, who led the effort to guide through the battle and restored the land to them. Then the soldiers tell this great story of the alarming war and pestilence at the hands of the offspring, and the arm of Brother Volition that had been one step ahead. At this declaration, the Jinns are called on the majesty of the dance to lead the micropolis from darkness to night to the glorious days of refreshment. Then the Jinns hail the dance in trust of glorious victory of the necropolis. The early summer. The summer after Milo finished his freshman year and before Amira was about to start high school had been quite eventful. In social studies, after taking the finals, the teacher put on the movie Sandlot. Some of the boys started getting bad ideas after Smalls pretended to drown so he could kiss Wendy. When it came to science class, the teacher gave the final on the last day of the last hour just to be a jerk, and bragged about how he made the last hours of school spending time doing work like the real world. As was common, many teachers did finals before the last day, as they wanted not to have to worry about teaching for another day. That first night, after school ended, the 8 Simple Rules for Dating My Teenage Daughter episode was YMCA, where Grandpa Jim punches another member for talking about how Bridget, her granddaughter, is hot, right to his face. This man had not known that Jim was her grandfather. That first weekend, Ray was on the golf trip, and Milo, Margaret, Lydia, and Grandma Pearl went to lunch at Stacy's Retro Diner on Saturday. After lunch, they went to a garden center to pick up some flowers for the summer. That night, Margaret, Milo, and Lydia also decided to go to church in order to sleep in the next morning. On Sunday evening, Steve called Milo, inviting him to Elfando Amusement Park, located just past the Dayton area. No, not Dayton, but the Akron area. Milo was planning on going to Seawoodin with Lydia school picnic, but found Elfando to be a better offer. Mind you, Milo was still a little bummed out about the school picnics not occurring for him anymore. On that first Monday off, Milo went to Clubhouse with Lydia, Eustace, and Samantha. As it was, Milo would be gone for 2 days after this first day and could not start on any projects. That night, Doris and Merle called Milo a minimum of 5 times. They called for various things, like how much money to bring, what kind of lunch meat to buy for sandwiches, what kind of supplies to bring, and what time to be over at Merle's. After a few calls, and quite in a disorganized fashion, Margaret refers to Steve's family as a bit strange. That night, before going to bed, Milo was looking through that hymn website and found a song based on Isaiah 9, The People Who in Darkness Walk. Milo read over that passage in the Bible and had some flashbacks to being in that summer after 5th grade before starting 6th grade. On Tuesday morning, Milo was dropped off over at Merle's, and within a half hour, the Milo was on the road with Steve, Merle, and Doris. Now, after a 2-hour drive, they arrived in the neighborhood where Alexander Amusement Park was located. Frankly, the neighborhood was pretty ghetto. Merle got a chuckle calling this the ghetto amusement park before arriving. However, this amusement park proved to be a lot of fun. Elfonder was like a larger version of Seawooden. Milo felt like he had dreamed about this park not too long ago over Holy Week. Now Milo did have a dream about some old-timey park. Steve did not go on too many rides, and Milo ended up riding with Doris and Merle for the most part. On one occasion, there was a nasty downpour of rain, and the rides had to be shut down temporarily. After this downpour, the rides opened up, and Steve tried forcing Milo to go on the bumper cars for the 5th time. Milo told Steve that they should try out some new rides too. Steve said they would go on the bumper cars as many times as he said. So after this, Milo went on the rides with Doris and Merle. The first ride they had gone on for the rest of the day was the magic carpet. They also went on some roller coasters, what else? Like, haunted house, some indoor roller coaster, some spinny rides. One ride Merle thought was quite lame and called it a lousy quality piece of garbage. There was another ride that was identical to Seawooden's ride, like a Wipeout or something, but it was not quite as fast, which Merle also gave quite a humorous commentary on. On the way home, Doris told Milo all about how Steve had gotten fat after being on an ADD medicine. Luckily, Steve was fast asleep. Milo then told Doris all about the mysterious disappearance of Father Clausen, and how the choir director also seemed to just disappear at the same time. Then on Wednesday, Milo had another trip which she was looking forward to Cedar Point with the St. Timothy's Youth Group. This had been the first fun activity that Connie had planned. Milo had been looking forward to this trip since being reminded of Anahita and thinking about his previous trip before starting high school with Richard Esposito. With the new youth minister, the trip was scheduled quite earlier. Before Margaret dropped Milo off at the church that they were meeting at, let's see what else happened. Then, on the way up, Margaret asked Milo all about how his trip went. Margaret suggested that Milo get some sleep on the bus ride, as he had quite 2 early mornings and quite some very active days. Then Milo was dropped off at the church, and Milo spotted some people coming in, and noticed that it was Mr. Japan dropping Lucia off, who also went on this trip, as apparently she was part of the junior youth group, to which Milo never knew. On the bus when they all got in, Milo overheard Lucius talking about Disney coloring books. As it was, Milo did not think about who he would hang around with that day, as he forgot that he was not in Richard's planned group this year. On the way up, the movie Daredevil was shown. That day had been quite fun for Milo, as it was with Milo's arrival. He was a bit stumped about who he would hang around with. So Milo decided that he would bite the bullet and asked if he could hang around with some graduates who he sort of knew. Milo was in a group with some people he barely knew, but got to know during that day. One of the boys' fathers is good friends with Uncle Mike, and another's brother is good friends with Rob, older brother. No, his brother is friends with Rob. Another was a distant cousin, relationship-wise. In fact, that was that man who, Will, his son. On a couple occasions, such as waiting on roller coaster lines, Milo saw Lucia. On some other occasions, they went on a steel roller coaster and some, what are some other ones? They also went on, like, some water rides in the old country area, in that frontier area, and one of those, like, one of those roller coasters that, like, has their own power to throw you up in the air. Kind of like a corkscrew. Then, for lunch, they ate at a 50s diner-themed restaurant. When Milo got back, Ray picked him up from the church that Margaret originally dropped him off there. The next day, Milo was in a bit of a funk after being at amusement parks for 2 days, which had been quite enjoyable. Getting back was not so much fun, as he had some frustration with Lydia and Eustace. Milo had not been prepared for clay class, as he had been out of town for 2 days, which Lydia should have known. And Lydia told Milo that he should have had brought supplies to class, and that he knew about this class. Similar to it. Frankly, Milo did not appreciate being talked to that way, or Lydia acted like a teacher over some silly class. Eustace, on the other hand, was being a self-righteous snob, constantly making smart remarks, particularly at Milo when he was playing with Sylvester. On that day, when that Milo came back, He and Lydia had gone over to Aunt Jane's for the rest of the day after play camp. While playing one of Eustace's video games, Milo admitted he hated it. Eustace made this rude retort, telling him that if not to play it if he hated it so much, and then told him not to break the game. Oh, this made Milo quite pissed. Then one day afternoon later, Sylvester started playing with Milo's eyes. Milo did the same thing back to him in a playful fashion. Sylvester, being only 6, said that only he was allowed to do it. Eustace told Milo to stop picking on his brother, which Milo retorted that he was playing and Sylvester was doing it first. Eustace then tells Milo that two wrongs don't make a right. Milo was not one to take being lectured by so little brat, and was going to let Eustace have it big. A few days later, when they were playing with some water balloons, Eustace kept being bossy and telling them to be careful about where their water balloons go. So Milo let Eustace have it and slammed the water balloon right at his back, and he started wailing, which put him in a foul mood the rest of the day. The next day, Eustace started saying things like that his mom was not too happy with Milo ballooning him. Frankly, Milo did not care, as he was getting sick of Eustace's bad and self-righteous attitude. The days in Londinium. For the kobolds, being back in Londinium, and by extension Headmortis, had been quite a strange experience. For the kobolds, they remembered how much they wanted to see Atlantica so long ago, and wondered if this trek was even worth it. To the Londinians, the kobolds seemed to be quite different than the kobolds they had known when they left for the term in Atlantica. Frankly, they seemed a bit shell-shocked. Vada told the stories of how the vendor woman did not take too well to Ulrich, Limad's departure, the Great Phoenix's visit, the task of attending to the possessed Atlanteans, and how they could be quite a nasty and fearful bunch. One Londinium told the kobolds now they understand what they went through, in reference to the shadow possession several years ago. After returning from Atlantica, the kobolds never bothered to walk through the mountains, as they had been fearful of coming into contact with the Atlanteans. The kobolds had feared that the vendor had already turned a large number of Atlanteans against them. Naturally, the kobolds had no interest in even finding out if this was true, or let alone ever returning to Atlantica. As it was, the kobolds got no further instructions and planned on sticking with Londinium in their headquarters. That year, the kobolds living in Pedmontis held a festival commemorating the appearance of the Great Phoenix, and by default, the visit of the unexpected guest. They had hoped that the Phoenix would return to them that year, but such a prospect was not realized. The Forester kobolds who traveled into Atlantica thought extensively about their meetings with the Great Phoenix one dark night, and how he brought tidings of restoration. Catherine and the evening. It seemed like this summer would not be going so well that year. Milo and Lydia were still spending a lot of time at Aunt Jane's, and Eustace was being just as priggish as ever. Sylvester had been in a foul mood, as he was on some unnecessary attention medicine. That year, the 4th of July was pretty simple. On Saturday, Jessie and Danielle held a family birthday party at Aunt Diane's to commemorate Ashlyn's first birthday. At this same time, Danielle was pregnant with her second-born, who would be staying a few months at Aunt Diane's. Well, Jessie was transferring somewhere else. For the 4th of July, the Rumcorns were in town, as they had to drop off Kyle, who would be moving into the Essex district. Kyle would be starting college at Susewego University in the fall. One Friday, the Bianca Tellos were invited to a family get-together at Elaine's house, as Uncle Al and Aunt Joan were in town for Ralph's son Jamie's wedding. As we remember, Ralph is one of Aunt Mary's sons. Both Aunt Mary and Uncle John were at the party, along with their kids, Grandma Pearl and Kyle. Milo had some flashbacks with the Williamsons, as he recently learned the song A Mighty Fortress, which he remembered had a flashback of being sung at Grandma Gladys's funeral. This had been the first time the Bianca Tellos had been at Elaine's since Grandma Gladys's funeral in the first place. Jason, Elaine's son, had been throwing the kids in the pool, which was the same pool Ben swam at several summers ago. Otherwise, Jennifer asked. Milo was telling Jennifer about this one time where, in class, a teacher brought in a little thing of chewing tobacco, and not a teacher, but some speaker, and the speaker asked Milo what he thinks it smells like. And Milo just said, my great-grandmother's old house, in reference to Grandma Gladys's place. That Saturday, Milo got invited over to Aunt Michelle's as his parents had to go to Jamie's wedding. That night, Milo, Aunt Michelle, and Gianni took a walk over to Grandma Dora's house, as Uncle Ottavio and Salvatore were painting her backyard porch. While getting ready to leave, Aunt Michelle started talking to her neighbor across the street. Milo first noticed the neighbor across the street named Catherine, but went by Katie. Milo had seen Katie before, but never noticed her until now. This girl is a talented musician on the fiddle, and also very pretty according to Milo. Milo had recognized the family from St. Timothy's, and Katie went to school with Minu. Her father, Nick, was also... what was her father's name? Nick was head of the church's folk band and lead guitar, singer and guitarist. The band also had a harmonica player, bassist, and the organist Jorge acting as the pianist. After Aunt Michelle's talk, she, Milo, and Gianni walked over to Grandma Dora's. When Uncle Ottavio and Salvatore were done working on the deck, the Fiorentinos, Grandma Dora, Aunt Michelle, Eustace, and Milo all were back to the house for dinner. For dessert, Uncle Ottavio served some spumoni ice cream. Later that night, Milo went back home to find that Uncle Al, Aunt Joan, and Grandma Pearl were visiting. Uncle Al got quite a kick out of Milo's plan on putting together a puzzle of a tiger mosaic made of smaller pictures of different felines. The next day, Milo and Ray went to the lake, as Lydia and Margaret went to a later noon mass. Lydia had a sleepover that ended at 11:30, even though mass started at 11. Ray considered just telling Lydia that they were gonna pick her up before 11 on the way to church, instead of making Margaret wait so long. They're not big on noon masses. Frankly, Milo did not really care to go to the noon mass, or the 11 o'clock mass anyways, as he was fearful of seeing the Jafaris in church. During that summer, Milo never walked in the Jafaris' neighborhood, as he had some unexplainable fear of the Jafaris. Possibly the big thing that bothered Milo was that Minu would be at the senior high school and really on a different page than him. Returned to the garden. After the feast of commemoration of the Phoenix, the kobolds decided to stay in the garden indefinitely. Frankly, the kobolds enjoyed the serenity of Pedmontis and had no interest in ever leaving. During their stay in Pedmontis, the kobolds enjoyed exploring the cliffs of Spartustica, walking through the woods, attending dinners and banquets, and traveling through their caves. and seeing Lake Tiberius. This nature scenery had been nice for the kobolds, who had been stuck in a rough part of a big city for almost a year. For the kobolds, the prospect of leaving Pedmontis was out of the question. During their stay in Pedmontis, the kobolds started making new friends with the residents, who had also been some of their distant relatives. Even the prospect of returning to Londinium had been less than ideal. For the time being, the kobolds rented a house in which they got a view of Atlantis, but did not typically like to look. During their stay, the kobolds learned much of the traditional music of the Pedmontis region. A new day. One Monday morning, Milo, Lydia, Eustace, and Samantha were supposed to have golf lessons, but got cancelled due to the rain. On the way home, Aunt Jane's car broke down, and they were temporarily stranded. Luckily, they got some help from some people Milo met just a couple days earlier. A few hours later, when Milo got home, he had gotten a call from Steve asking if he wanted to go to Seawoodin with him, Doris, and Merle the next day. Frankly, Milo was thrilled about this, as he could not stand being at Eustace's, and sick of having to walk on eggshells around Sylvester. That same afternoon, Milo found a now-defunct website known as Hymprint.net, which comes from the GIA Music system. GIA Music is one of the major suppliers of Catholic hymnals and contemporary liturgical music in the United States. That night, Margaret and Milo had dinner at Taco Bell. Out of the blue, at dinner, Milo asked Margaret why she told Kazim that he liked Middle Eastern girls. Margaret explained that Kazim was especially friendly and knew that he was comfortable talking about his culture. How Margaret knew, we don't know. The next day, Milo and the kids had golf lessons. At this first lesson, they met Sabrina, a blonde girl who goes to school with Seamus. Lydia told Sabrina that she and Milo were good friends with Seamus's family. Afterwards, Milo was dropped off at his house and waited for Steve to arrive, as he was currently being picked up from summer school. Mind you, Steve was not exactly the sharpest tool in the tool shed. Soon enough, Doris and her mom arrived to pick Milo up. In the car, Steve had his creepy friend, who we remember was Saul, who was also in summer school, who was being quite a pervert in the car, through constantly waving to Milo. Steve, on the other hand, was laughing in a very immature way. Doris's mom, Selma, was also in the car and gave both Steve and Saul quite a rough reprimanding. Now Selma is a grouchy chain smoker who would not exactly win Grandmother of the Year award. As Steve was acting quite stupid and was going to be doing homework, Doris took Milo back to her and Merle's house. Yeah, they built a house together. While Milo was visiting with Doris, she told Milo all about her marriage with Neil, even though Milo did not ask that such information. Doris is one who does not get much out much, and has a habit of sharing overly personal information with acquaintances, which Margaret can attest to. Plus Doris told Milo all about Neil doing a lousy job picking out the wedding songs when they got married, by telling the priest to pick them out for her. Now Milo I told Doris about how his cousins got married recently and Courtney. Mind you, back in those days, they did not have CDs to listen to the music beforehand, and everything was on cassettes or records. Doris then told Milo that she should have known not to marry Neil in the first place. Then Doris told Milo about her dad being an alcoholic and keeping her, and how she kept her oldest son, Adam, away from him. And to this day, Adam resenting her for this. Then Doris explained to Milo that Steve was a spoiled brat and had been hanging around Neil too long. Then Doris explained how her mother was a chain smoker and never really worked a day in her life, and was a mooch. Eventually, Merle returned home from work. Around this time, Steve called the house and demanded that Doris get her ass to the house. Doris hung up on Steve for that language and gave Milo the phone to prank him once it rang again. Milo answered the phone in a stereotypical Asian accent and started yelling at Steve. Then Merle answered the phone a second time and told him if he did not stop acting stupid, that he would take care of her like he did his Asian date. So the story goes that Merle was on a date with a Chinese lady who kept bashing him, and he threw her out of his car. Finally, they were on the way to Seawooden, where Milo had to crack a joke by asking Steve how he met Saul. Doris and Merle got quite a laugh at his joke. By today's standards, such a comment could be construed as quite homophobic. At the park, Steve still did not go on too many rides, and went on the bumper cars over and over again. The whole day, Merle referred to Steve as Chicken Boy. Otherwise, Milo couldn't help but asking, but giving him the nickname Wimpo. At SeaWorld, Milo tried a new roller coaster with Doris and Merle that had just been installed. During the day, Doris kept telling Steve that Milo was the only friend that she liked. After spending the day at the park, Steve demanded that they stop at McDonald's, to which Doris told him that the only thing he needs is a nice fresh salad. On the way home, Merle and Doris asked Milo what he thought of Steve's friends, Dude, Saul, Henry, Bert, and Kurt. Milo was brutally honest, referring to Dude as an egghead, and then referred to Henry as an incestuous hick. Then he referred to Bert and Kurt as having a little something special, and his friend Bert being paler than a zombie, and even named a ride on roller coaster Tycoon after him. And then with Saul, he said that he's from a whole different world and potentially should be away from children. Now Steve did not take this too well, despite Doris and Merle getting quite a laugh. When they arrived home, Doris and Merle accidentally woke Lydia up, who had been sleeping, and Lydia got annoyed with Milo, saying that he was doing this to antagonize Steve. On Thursday, Aunt Jane took Milo, Lydia, Eustace, Samantha, Sylvester, and Salvatore bowling. Sylvester had a pretty rough day and cried when he did not like the toy he got at Burger King in his kids' meal. According to him, he already had that toy. Then Sylvester cried when Salvatore made his names Little Silly. Now, so Salvatore ended up having to change it. Milo and Salvatore found a bowl from an old user whose name was Dave, with his name engraved on it. Why would somebody do that and donate that in the first place? After getting back, Eustace was being a real jerk. He had constantly interrupted Milo when he called him out, and when Lydia called him out on it, Eustace said no one cares what he thinks. That same day, Eustace and Lydia got into a major disagreement, and she asked him why he was always acting this way. Milo slowly came over, gave Lydia a consoling tap on the shoulder, telling her that is just how Eustace is. Eustace flipped out, telling Milo to shut up. Lydia said that she stuck up for her, and that Milo was being just as bad as Eustace. That night, Ray took Milo and Salvatore to Biblo's Lebanese restaurant for dinner. This was the restaurant that Ray and Milo went to 2 years ago after the Colors party. Upon arrival, Milo said business is booming sarcastically, as there was no one in the parking lot. After dinner, they went back to the Filantinos with Grandma Dora also visiting. Actually, she was over for dinner. They talked about what they had for dinner, and Milo said something at the restaurant reminded him of something Grandma Dora used to make, back when she was quite the cook. On Sunday, Uncle Matt threw a surprise party for Aunt Marie in New Seneca. That morning, Milo and Lydia had to serve Mass before heading up. After church, the Biancatellos headed up to New Seneca and arrived for the party. At the party, there were a lot of people, like their neighbors. This party sort of reminded Milo of his previous trip to New Seneca. On the way back, they got Burger King for dinner. The weaning completion plans. The time was coming for the weaning off of Minyu to be almost completed. For the past few months, Victoria had succeeded in distracting Milo away from Minyu and realized how successful she had been. Victoria had kept Minyu off the bus on the last day and knew well that Milo would not want to know why she was not on the bus. Melendo congratulated Victoria on her work, but explained that the next step needs to happen very soon. Melendo knew that the memories of the summer he frequently walked up to the Jafari's house had been so needed to be desecrated for the time being. In order for this completion to occur, Melendo summoned Huzisha, Kashmir, and Alexander for a task. Melendo got the three summoned, all caught up on her latest advancements on the weaning process. Huzisha explained that the two other girls may have to stay in the picture a little longer, but he explained that they should not be too much trouble. Alexander had been a little disappointed as he knew the competition was now over. However, Alexander was giving the task of opening up the world of vast opportunities, and Melendo explained that this new change would come to be more interesting on grounds of pure curiosity. Kashmir asked Huzisha if he ever got any news on why the Jafaris needed to come into the picture. Still, Huzisha had absolutely no answer. The boating trip and vacation. Another week later, the Rumcorns from Indianapolis came up with their motorboat and invited Milo, Lydia, and Grandma Pearl to join them on this trip. That day, Milo started this ridiculous tutoring program at Cider Pond. Milo was not particularly in love with the program to begin with, as they were funny about anyone missing a day. despite this being some optional summer class. The reasoning was that the tutor did not get paid if the student did not show up. On the first day, the Rumcorns had arrived. They took the Biancatellos and Grandma Pearl to see the movie I, Robot. Milo had not been a particularly big fan of the movie that first time, and it made his memories at the Toledo Imagination Station not seem so appealing as he remembered them. Now, Milo had never been a fan of science fiction to begin with. That night, after dinner, Milo saw a documentary about sitcom history. There was a scene Milo remembered from the show Roseanne, where DJ whined about Darlene calling him a prevert, and Roseanne explains, he's a pervert. After the tutoring session the next day, Grandma Pearl picked Milo up and took him over to the boats. On the way, Grandma Pearl had the song You Can't Hurry Love on the radio, which Milo remembered from Cedar Point the previous summer. Overall, this day had been quite enjoyable as Milo got away from Eustace. Plus, this had been a fun trip otherwise, as Uncle Wayne was a fun person and quite the jokester. They did some activities like tubing, water skiing, and picnicking at the beaches. One strange thing that Aunt Bertha did was she made sandwiches on rolls for the adults, but made Swable sandwiches for the kids. On Thursday, Emma took Milo and Lydia to Applebee's for lunch. As much as Milo enjoyed his trip with the Rumcorns, he was happy to get some real food. Emma asked Milo and Lydia about his trip with Aunt Bertha. Now Aunt Bertha is not even Emma's aunt to begin with. And then during lunch, Emma for some reason brought up Maple Carroll and Grandpa Clarence. Now, Emma always found it quite humorous that Carol went by the term Maple instead of grandmother, and they had quite a laugh about that. Milo told Emma all about how he finally gets some good food now that he's at Applebee's. Emma told Milo not to be such a picky eater all the time. Now Emma knew that quite a bit from Milo's experience. On Friday, before the Rumcorns left, the Biancatellos treated them and Grandma Pearl out to a Mexican dinner. At the dinner, Kevin poured a whole lot of hot sauce on his dish and said, "Oh, this isn't so hot," and said he could eat it all in one sitting. Kevin took a couple bites, bragging, and then after 3 bites, he's like, "Oh, I can't eat this anymore. This is too hot." Then, Ray discreetly left and went to pay the bill. That night, when they got back, they had a present for Kevin for his 16th birthday, and Kevin opened it up to find a bottle of the hot sauce he was so confident about that burned his mouth. That weekend, Salvatore joined the Biancatellos at a condo on the beach that Margaret got through her again. This was the same condo from the previous year. In the afternoon, Ray, Milo, and Lydia went through a bike ride on the paths at the beach. Lydia had seen her nemesis, Piotr, much to her displeasure. Now that evening had been quite fun and relaxed. When they got back, they found that Margaret had brought in Salvatore and Ginny along. Now, they had been wondering if Margaret knew, considering that she was out for the day. For dinner they went across the street and had dinner at Stacy's Retro Diner. Then when they got back to the house, they were talking about some of the old times. Milo really didn't feel the same way, like he was back. Didn't feel the same to him as the previous year, maybe considering that what had gone on, that this year was not so close to something brand new starting. The next day, the family went to a later mass, as it took a while to get to St. Timothy's from the beach. This mass had the folk band, which performed great music. Even Monsignor Warner was more charismatic at that mass than the early ones. Katie and her mom were in church, much to Milo's pleasure and expectations. The folk band sang this American folk hymn as a second communion song known as Just a Closer Walk with Thee. A teacher from William Jetson's said hi to Milo at communion, but did not even know who Lydia was, even though Lydia said she had seen that lady every day. After church, they dropped Milo off back at his house as he had a game. Milo was a bit bummed out, as it seemed to all have gone so quickly. That afternoon, Milo went with Merle, Steve, and his friend Dude to a sports park that had the go-karts and bumper cars. This was the same sports park that Merle had brought him to a couple times before. After riding on the cars, Doris showed up with lunch. Doris made these terrible sandwiches on hot dog buns with an ungodly amount of mayonnaise. Milo wanted to get an ice cream cone after, but had to choke down these sandwiches as to make it look like he was not hungry enough. After being unable to eat the last few bites, Milo discreetly tossed the sandwiches on the ground when Doris wasn't looking. The next day, Ray got quite a laugh when Milo told him all about the hot dog bun sandwiches. So it looks like Milo had quite a bit of bad luck with sandwiches for the last few days. The next week, the Biancatellos went on day trips. The day before leaving, Milo saw Roxana's mom at the grocery store. The next morning, the Biancatellos drove to Kelly Island. Now they were there for only a day. No, 2 days. At Kelly's Island, Milo had this French Christmas hymn that he downloaded, known as He is Born the Holy Child, or in French, Il est né, stuck in his head. Now this is a joyful declaration of the birth of the long-awaited Messiah, according to the Christians. There was at once a great vision in the sky, of a celebration of a new school year, sung with in great jubilation. The students told the stories about how this day had been foretold for 3 years and had finally came to pass. The teachers declared that this new year, a great and pure gift from the heavens. Then the students sang in unison with the teachers, heralding a time of heavenly peace. The next day, the Biancatellos went on a trip to Cedar Point. This trip had not been the same as the trip Milo took with his youth group. Now they still went on some rides, and the song You Can't Hurry Love was playing throughout the park all day. Now this time they went on more rides just than only roller coasters. Now they met one lady who just cut in front of them, Milo and Lydia and some other kids who were sitting on the middle racks, dividers, and some lady said, the lady with her told them, hey, they were there first. This lady said, well, if they're too stupid not to get off, then they deserve to be cut in front of. Like, what is this? Otherwise, for dinner they ended up getting McDonald's, as they did not like the food they had there. This was considering the fact that they got lunch at the Chuck Wagon Cafe, which had been pretty terrible at best. On Friday, the Biancatellos took a trip to Toledo to see the zoo and the aquarium. Margaret met a friend, Tessa, with her little girls. For the zoo, this had not been quite as exciting as Milo remembered. They did see the old wolf exhibit, but they did not get to see the aquarium area due to some time restraints. When going into Toledo for dinner, Milo was a bit disappointed that the town was nothing like he remembered with his memories of the Imagination Station or that game over the past year. Now this is keeping in mind that they were not in the more ritzy area of the downtown and more in a different area of the city. The return of the phoenix. The kobolds had been in the garden one afternoon when the elfess who had given birth in the guest house years ago showed up riding a donkey. The elfess had thanked the kobolds, and they once bowed down before her. Then a cow appeared, setting a nest on a perch made of hay. Then a set of sheep came by with their vestments made of their finest wool. Then 3 doves started singing a song, announcing that he is near. Then at once, the great phoenix arrived and landed down on the nest the cows made. Then the great phoenix hailed the elfess and raised his wing. The kobolds, elfess, and animals all bowed down before the great phoenix. The phoenix instructed the cows, donkey, and sheep to eat the plant growth of the particular location. When the overgrowth was eaten away, the long-forgotten arch was revealed that once housed the bridge. To replace the bridge, there was a new overlook in which one could see the temple quite closely. The kobolds gathered to the overlook and got a majestic view of the temple that they had nearly forgot about. The phoenix announced that the kobolds this day forward had permission to enter into the Atlantean temple city. The phoenix then thanked the kobolds for their efforts in attending to the possessed Atlanteans, who would be soon healed but soon. The journey to the Devusidian complex. One evening, while Melinda, Alexander, and Kashmir had been doing some work in their office, Melendel had went into a trance where a great Celtic knot glowed brightly, and he saw an airship. Then the knot commanded the 3 to board the ship. At his word, Melendel, Alexander, and Kashmir had headed outside, and the airship was waiting for them just as expected. At once, the 3 entered in and found many Amogrammatrons who had helped them, former Magnuses, along with the Seers, Uzisha, Durnil, Azias, and Uriama. This ship traveled along a great and stormy body of water, full of mighty waves, but with no harm done to the ship. As soon as the ship drew nearer, the waters greatly calmed. This happened on its counted 3 times total. Then the ship docked at this green and familiar region. The further they walked, they spotted the temple complex that houses the Devusidian Temple, the Inanian Temple, and the Rose Garden, planted so long ago with the statue of Cybele, the Great Mother. The Isaiah Kerosene had come to greet them with great gladness and brought them over to the gardens. The Jinns had all discovered that the shoots from the root seed had begun to spring forth. The rose that was originally offered as planted in the center and had become quite majestic. As was promised, the offering was coming to full fruition. The Isaiah Kerosene then took out a scroll from his robe, and the Jinns at once knew that the 2 seals had been loosened, and only 3 remained. Then the Jinns heard an angelic song, far off but quite clearly. Then the Jinns sang a song of great jubilation with the angelic ministers. The great foresight. One Wednesday morning, Danielle gave birth to her second-born, Melina. Now Jessie had been out of town for business, and Danielle was staying at Aunt Diane's. That night, Milo had a dream about being in school, beginning a school year, and seeing all the freshmen, while an old man with a white mustache started giving a pre-dinner grace. Milo saw something in the school that he only noticed on the last day of school when he was last there. Upon awaking, Milo was not exactly thrilled to be having a dream about school when August just arrived. On Friday, Milo and Ray went to a football charity game that they had last attended 3 years ago. During the game, Milo started getting some flashbacks to the falls the columns moved, and he felt slightly bummed out. Then Milo had a flashback to the days when he started 7th grade, and in particular the sleepover with the O'Malleys the night after Fall Fest. Milo then became extremely optimistic about the upcoming year and dreamed of such great possibilities. Milo had seen many students he recognized, including Sabrina from golf. After the game, Milo and Ray picked up a pizza and some wings. When Milo got home, he downloaded a song on Kazaa known as Unto Us a Boy is Born, which is just an alternative translation of the hymn Unto Us is Born a Son from the previous Christmas. Milo also downloaded the hymns Jesu Bambino and Eternal Father, Strong to Save. Lydia had been watching special features of the movie 13 going on 30 with whatever. That weekend, 2 of the Biancatello families, Fiorentinos and some of the O'Malleys, went on a family trip, returning to Drake's Forest State Park as they had visited previous summers and 3 summers ago before Milo began 7th grade. This furthered Milo's flashbacks to 7th grade. The Fiorentinos and the Biancatellos drove up together. When they arrived, they went for a hike and ran into Uncle Leo, Aunt Jane, Eustace, Samantha, and Sylvester. On this trip, they did most of the same activities they had done the first year they went. This year, Uncle Matt and Alicia bailed on going. Now, according to Matt, his cousin, that Alicia was all pissed off about this. This trip, for the most part, included a hike, tubing, going out to dinner at this restaurant known as End of the Road, run by a bunch of hillbillies. Otherwise, on the canoeing, this really instigated Milo's memories of the first year they went. Otherwise, they didn't get to go on the maze, as when they got there it was closed. At dinner, on a couple occasions, Matt put soy sauce in Milo's drink when he wasn't looking. On the way back, they went to this hot dog specialty stand known as Frank's. Then they stopped at an ice cream store that had one of those 24 flavor stands, known for giving like these generic syrups, flavored cones. The next day, the Biancatellos went to Geauga Lake as Margaret let Lydia take some of her friends for a day trip. Milo had remembered going to the park the summer before when it was Six Flags. Frankly, the park did not match up to the glorious park it was the year before, considering that they got bought out by Cedar Fairs, and then all their animals got transported to different parks. Frankly, this place, the old SeaWorld, was just one giant joke with nothing there. The water park was nothing really to write home about. Milo recognized very little from the park as it currently was, and had no flashbacks to his trip with Sean and Jack for his 8th grade trip, unfortunately. On the way back, they stopped at McDonald's for dinner. On Friday night, Uncle Ottavio took Milo and Salvatore to a baseball game. As for the game, while Salvatore saw one of his old friends who had lived out of town but knew the Fiorentino family quite well, including many of his cousins. In fact, one of his cousins had been married to this woman at one point. During that weekend, Milo started downloading more Christmas music, anticipating the holiday season. In fact, Milo downloaded many Christmas hymns in foreign languages. This felt like quite a unique experience that he really had not felt in a while when downloading and uploading Christmas music. Now, frankly, Milo was getting a little bored with some of the hymns and the Mormon Tabernacle in general. That night, Milo purposely tried to stay up late in hopes that he would oversleep and the family would end up going to a later mass that Katie might be at. Milo had no such luck. That morning, Ray woke Milo up nice and early, much to his disappointment. That Wednesday, Milo had his 16th birthday. That night they went out for dinner at some steakhouse. Over the day, Eustace was over and still being a bit of a pain. Now the O'Malleys had been in town. As to why, we don't really know why. They were just there for a day. On Thursday, Milo found out that Lydia had basketball last week of her vacation, which was when they were scheduled to stay at the O'Malleys for a week. Lydia was not too happy about this, as she was the one to plan it, but the one unable to go. That Saturday, in church, Milo saw Katie performing in the church rock band, known as the Holy Rock, as the fiddler, much to his pleasure. The Kobold Journey. The time had come for the Kobolds to take their journey back to Atlantis. Despite the anticipation of traveling to the temple grounds, the Kobolds were still a bit apprehensive about leaving the Pedmontis Gardens and coming into contact with the vendor community from Atlantica. The Kobolds were also apprehensive about coming into contact with the Shadows, but the Kobolds remembered how Daxividus came to them before to cast the Shadows last time and called out for his assistance and the Phoenix's promise. The Kobolds naturally had to walk through Atlantica and had been a bit apprehensive. By this time, rumor had long spread that Daxividus would be coming to Atlantica to cast out the Shadows that had been tormenting particular street Atlanteans. The Kobolds were still in Atlantica when the rumors began. One evening, after a great feast and send-off, the Kobolds left the garden and journeyed through Londinium. The journey had not been particularly pleasant, as the Kobolds longed for the garden and still apprehensive about going through Atlantica. Pre-anticipation. The last week of summer vacation, Milo was visiting his cousins Matt in New Seneca. This trip had been utterly frustrating for Milo, as Matt was becoming quite lazy, and doing anything became utterly problematic. Before leaving, Milo really did not want to go to New Seneca. Now Steve was over earlier that day, and they went for a walk down to Salvatore's. Milo saw Katie outside tanning in a lounge chair. Then they went down to the park, and Milo saw Anahita, whom he recognized from school, as she was in the band. So essentially, Milo was thinking about them on the way up and wanted to stay back and see them. Plus, Milo realized the next time he would be back in Cider Pond, he would be near to having to stop to face going back to school. When Milo got there, he found the song and listened to the song I Vowed to Thee My Country, which he remembered from when he first saw Anahita, or at least gave her some attention at all. To be fair, over the trip, Matt had been a pretty big wet blanket that week. Milo suggested that they go bike riding, but Matt worried that they could get hurt. One night, after going out for dinner at Applebee's, Aunt Marie took the kids to rent some movies. Matt picked out Ninja Turtles, even though Aunt Marie suggested something Milo would also like. Matt wouldn't budge and complained that none of his friends will watch the show with him. Milo did not appreciate this and being thinking like forced to watch the movie. Milo had to sit through this G-rated ridiculous movie. Another day, Aunt Michelle, Aunt Jane, Eustace, Salvatore, Gianni, in for a visit. Salvatore recounted how Milo just was staring at the wall when he arrived, as Milo was so bored. Before they got there, they stopped at Wendy's for lunch, and during this time, Salvatore threatened to order Sylvester some mandarin oranges instead of fries, and Sylvester almost started crying. While the guests were visiting, Sylvester started acting up, as little kids often do. Milo made the biggest mistake in shushing Sylvester. Sylvester then made it clear that he was never to shush him again. Or as he said, "Don't you ever say that word to me ever again, ever." The next night, it was Milo's turn to pick the movie, and he chose Scary Movie 3. In the middle, Matt turned off his movie as it supposedly got too late, as in 10 p.m. in the summer. This was out of fear that Matt would miss lunch. The plan was to get Chinese food at a place called Taipei. After Matt turned the video off, Milo had been pouting in his room when Samantha and Lily came to console him. This had been the turning point for Samantha, when she became like the rest of the Biancatellos, and less like Eustace. Both Samantha and Lily felt bad for Milo, as Matt had been acting like an overcautious jerk and willing to do anything fun with Milo or be a good host. That Friday, the O'Malleys returned to Cider Pond for a family party. Before leaving, Milo departed with them, and the dog Tiberius started barking before they could even leave, and Uncle Matt had to take a while just to get him back into the car. That day, the cousins went to see Wooden. So far, the day was going good, and Milo was happy to be back in Cider Pond. And let's see, Milo saw Margaret and Lydia after a week, along with Fiorentinos and the other Biancatellos. Towards the afternoon, there had been a bit of a nasty rainstorm. Both Milo and Salvatore wanted to go to Silk Town, but Matt was being a pain and complaining about the rain that was coming. Salvatore asked Milo if he wanted to wait for Matt, but Milo said that he just needed to get away from Matt, as he had been such a wet blanket all week. Salvatore said, told Milo that he had the same problem a few weeks ago when Matt complained the whole time they were on a walk. Eventually, Matt grew out of this ridiculous stage.